Hello everyone, how's it going? This is Zach Murray with Earthbound Media Group, and I would like to thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Using Social Content to Build and Empower an Online Community. We had such a great turnout and response from the first time that we presented this content, so we decided to do it again and give everyone another chance to join us, and we want to thank you for being one of those people. So just some quick background information on Earthbound Media Group. We are an interactive marketing and communications agency that specializes in serving clients across a lot of verticals: higher education, healthcare, insurance, financial, technology, the entertainment industry, as well as nonprofits. Some of our core services really include all aspects of digital marketing, so branding and technology consultation, web, video, and interactive design and development, as well as mobile, display, and social media marketing. Presenting for you today is one of EMG's managing partners and Chief Visionary Officer, Damian Navarro. Damian has more than a decade of strategic marketing, online advertising, enterprise technology, social media, and brand strategy experience, having worked with such clients such as Scottrade, NBC Universal, and Conagra Phillips. His subject matter expertise is in such topics as technology innovations in marketing, behavioral marketing trends, and Damian's visions for the future of integrated marketing, advertising, and communications has made him a highly respected executive in our field. Before I turn it over to Damian, just want to remind everyone that you are highly encouraged to submit questions throughout the presentation by entering them into the dialogue text box on your screen. The presentation also in its entirety will be posted on the EMG website later this afternoon, and we're also going to make the slides available for download via SlideShare. So all of the links and resources to the presentation and our social media pages are going to be posted at the end of the presentation, and we'll also send you the links in a follow-up email. So no shortage of access to this very valuable information. Without any further delay, it's my pleasure to turn the conversation over to Damian to get things started.
Thanks a lot, Zach. All right, everybody, let's go ahead and jump in here. Basically, what we're going to be doing is covering a few things, and what we really want to do is determine and help you guys to define what exactly are the values of using branded content and earned media. So we're going to define a little bit about that after we go through some initial research. Next, we'll define whether or not Knowledge Center might be a good approach for your business model. So we'll talk a little bit about how these Knowledge Centers, how earned in social media, are being used by different industries and verticals today, and that's going to cover everything from education and healthcare verticals all the way to some of the larger household name brands, and kind of what have we gleaned and learned from them. Learning what forms and directions businesses are taking in developing these types of knowledge centers and branded content approaches, how to develop your content creation or their content playbook, and then finally some questions about getting started and really things that you should be asking yourself as well as your team before we kind of jump into the bigger scope of developing these. So setting the context, this is really just some things that you're pretty familiar with, but are always really good to kind of define the parameters of what we're working within, the environment we're working within. So I put together just a few statistics that I think might be really helpful in making sure that you guys kind of understand where this direction is coming from. So of course the first is that obviously many internet users are using networking sites every month. And these are all pretty recent statistics, as you'll see, hopefully within the last 2 years. The second, the portals, social networking, and entertainment sites make up almost 47% of the most visited content destinations. And what does that really mean for you is that obviously when we're developing on our social channels and when we're developing on our websites, looking at opportunities to create engagement via developing entertaining content, educational content, but almost mimicking some of the more popular sites that people are visiting every day. The second is that, in the past, it had really been the millennials and the younger generations that were fostering this type of engagement and were really pushing the envelope with the different types of sites that they were visiting. But as you can see here, especially in the boomer and even some of the more seniors demographics, is that they are incredibly growth. There's incredible growth, especially amongst the boomer population, in their engagement within the social networking sites. Finally, teens. If your market's teens, this is probably one of the best ways to really engage with them. And I'll show you some great examples of how different brands, as well as some federal systems, are using these types of environments to attract teens directly to their marketplace. Participation in social causes is also high amongst teens. So we're also going to talk about how do you build kind of nonprofit sentiment or ideas right into your social channels or into the social space where they feel like they're being engaged to give back. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well in the future. Also, when it comes to Black, Hispanic, and Asian students, we are seeing higher levels of engagement when it comes to how they are using these social sites. So the type of content they're creating, the type of content they're engaging with, this is a great approach that you might use to take a multicultural approach to the marketplace. Finally, Google Sites, including YouTube, account now for almost 10% of time spent online. So when we're talking about what type of content you might be creating, video, of course, is going to be very high. Facebook and Twitter, of course, continue to grow exponentially daily. And also 66% of all adult internet users are watching these YouTube videos, and using education are now the #2 and #3 most watched types of videos. So we'll talk quite a bit about video-based content, like I said earlier. Finally, over 13 million articles are available on Wikipedia. And what that means is that people are turning to alternative and third-party resources to get their information, to get their questions answered. So we're going to look a lot about how developing these type of knowledge center sites and really evolving your websites to become much more friendly when it comes to being the first topic of discussion when determining what the question answer might be, and that they're looking to you to answer those questions for them is a great opportunity. So we'll talk a little bit about making sure that that type of how-to exercise is built right into the site itself. And then finally, I think the major takeaway is that mobile and tablets are going to change everything. How content is being accessed, how it's being played, and how it's being shared is, of course, universally transforming almost on a daily basis. Additionally, access to this type of content is going to become much more prolific in the next 2 to 3 years. Tablets also was recently at South by Southwest and had an opportunity to listen to Barry Diller talk, the media kingpin, on kind of his take on some of the new media channels. And one of the things that really resonated well with me was the fact that tablets are really going to see a high proliferation amongst the senior world, simply because of the larger text and the larger screens, as well as the keys, and that they're a lot more easier on the fingers. So that really had some major takeaways there of how people might be using tablets to really create a larger and more engaging environment for the aging population. So why is this all important from the C-level perspective? Well, the recent McKinsey report basically surveyed over 1,700 corporate executives and found now that 69% are claiming advantages of social media. So this is a huge, huge thing in our world, is the fact that executives now are understanding that the media channel, the social media channel, is simply like every other media channel. You're going to have it, and you're going to have to build resources around it. And it's ultimately going to drive business just as relevantly as any other media channel within the overall marketing mix. And here's some great takeaways. They do realize that there is a lower cost of doing business associated with using earned in social media. There's better access to knowledge. So being able to, in the case I'll show in a second, that when the way that Dell had developed out a knowledge center for their community, the type of information and social intelligence that they're able to glean that they can directly apply to the development of their products is unprecedented. Increased marketing effectiveness, and ultimately, let's skip down to the end, higher revenue. The fact that these C-level executives are now understanding that these types of loyalty and earned media strategies are garnering business is a huge, huge thing for the marketplace. So what types of business opportunities are we seeing within that social content is essentially fueling? The first, of course, is branded entertainment. The fact that we can create content that is both engaging, educational, and entertaining now is a huge, huge step in the right direction when it comes to how we're using the social channel space. Public relations, cause marketing. Many of these different types of sites that are using social content and earned media to fuel themselves are obviously tied very closely to social causes and environmental causes, or simply for positive public relations to overcome negative reputation within the marketplace. Finally, customer service. They're answering questions. We talked a little bit about the how-to videos, and we're going to show how customer service plays directly into that in a very active environment. Thought leadership, really demonstrating to the marketplace that you guys are absolutely ahead of the game. And of course, customer acquisition. The fact that you're using the social community to acquire new customers, to acquire new students or patients, is very important to understand how that dynamic is working. So this is just a breakdown of the 3 different types of media. Well, actually 4, because the bottom one has both shared and owned media included. But it really is just for us to get a clear example of how and what choices we have when determining what type of mix we want to put together to acquire new customers. So in this particular case, we're really going to be focusing on earned media. This is a great graphic just to really represent the type of relationship that earned and social media are allowing between the customer and the business. It used to be before that there was just one very simple funnel of communication, and that was kind of downwardly between the business and the customer. And of course now we're looking at something much more complex, that the social media is allowing for different entry points for businesses to appeal to a diversity of customers. So that conversation is very important when we start to understand how and where we create this content. Secondly, traditional .edu, .org, .com, and media sites are really targeting a later phase in the customer acquisition cycle. So as you can see here, this is just really determining the flow of marketing influence that the brand has in controlling the customer as they move through the decision-making cycle. And really what we're talking about here is that traditionally we've been targeting individuals at the phase 4 and 5. This is when they've kind of determined that they are interested in your product or service, and they're starting to become a little bit more savvy and doing a deeper dive into what type of brand or what type of role your brand is going to play in their decision. The opportunity that we have with branded content or media is to hit them much sooner in the decision-making cycle. And that is that right when we're beginning to introduce the idea that your particular brand might be a good fit, we want to make sure that we do it carefully. And you're going to hear me use the word selling sideways in the sense that people are very turned off at this particular phase. And we're talking really the phase 1, phase 2 stages from brands. They want to feel like they have control over the type of research and deeper dive that they're doing before they decide to make a decision on whether or not you might be a consideration. So we'll talk a lot about how front and center your branding from your institution or organization needs to be, or how much of a back seat that it needs to take in order for these individuals to feel like they are more comfortable in exploring the information that you're looking to provide them and helping them to make better decisions about their life's choice or their product. So let's get started. Let's talk about the ecosystem. Let's look at a number of different case studies that we've kind of understood are best practices in the field. So where does a lot of the inspiration come from? Well, here's the business case. We really looked at two diverse case studies here. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with TED, but the TED site has become somewhat of a mecca for all innovation across the world. They host a series of talking events, videotape those, and have created just a really robust and working environment for different customers to engage in. I'll actually bring up the site here. And TED really serves a number of business challenges. I believe it is a nonprofit, but what's been so exciting with TED is the fact that they've been able to essentially create a business model around content itself, around educating, entertaining, and creating innovative content for a host of different types of environments. And the other exciting thing here is that it isn't vertical-centric. This isn't just healthcare. It's not just education. It's just not finance or highly regulated industries. This is a diversity of different individuals that are essentially thought leaders within their industry that TED has been able to attract to create engaging video content that they then share across a host of mediums. Obviously, the TED website is the most important site for people to visit if they really want to explore in a very personalized way, as you can see here, by being able to search for different types of content. And you can also see rated, jaw-dropping, persuasive, courageous. They've really taken a different approach to how they're categorizing their content, which I think is very, very interesting. And it really sets and differentiates themselves from other different types of organizations that are providing video-based content. The other exciting thing is the partnerships that TED has been able to cultivate, such as with Virgin America. If you go on Virgin America's flights, you can actually go to the touchscreen on the airplane and see different types of TED content. And TED has been very open, and if you could almost say open-sourced, about letting individuals reuse their content in a host of different environments across the sites. So great inspiration when we're thinking about what type of content we might be able to create on our sites that is very different from the typical content that we've been doing in the past, and that is simply focusing our efforts on products and services, and instead refocusing those efforts to creating content that people are actually wanting to digest and share. The other idea the other case study that we found was Dell, and Dell was one of the first ones that really came up with this community-based site in which they could foster engagement across a host of different environments. And this was led by many of their actual developers and technology engineers that would engage directly with the consumers in the Idea Storm site. I think the really inspirational thing, too, that I take away from Dell is that they really got the fact that crowdsourcing and actually using your audience to help come up with ideas, to help share those ideas, and help proliferate those ideas was really an important business step when they understood how the community and how social media was beginning to evolve. And so in this particular case, you can see that some of the top things are view posted ideas by the community, post your ideas, vote for ideas. So they're really taking best practices of how social communities like to engage within these environments and making sure that those are front and center. Always what we're going to be looking at when it comes to creating this amount of content is the ability to quickly sift through content, find the content that you're interested in engaging. So a company like Dell has really fostered care and helpfulness right into their business channel. So getting back to some of the things that we talked about earlier, building stronger partnerships through selling sideways. As you can see, Dell is really creating an environment not around their brand or their products, but around the care and around fostering involvement from their community and from their fans. Whether they're lovers or haters, they want people to explore one another and talk about the ideas that are problematic or that are uplifting. Customer service, of course, plays directly into this, and the fact that they're using the community itself to overcome objections and not necessarily a Dell representative. Publicity, PR, and brand awareness, increasing your digital footprint. This simply is a great example of how TED is really fostered an international brand amongst itself by leveraging the content that they were creating already and making sure that it was easily available, was very interesting, but also created the partnerships such as Virgin's in order to create a stronger ability to get their word out there and to build brand equity around themselves. So let's go back to what this selling sideways is, marketing sideways. Jay Baer really talks about the difference between selling and helping is only 2 letters, but the gap in reality is much larger. So this is just simply saying that direct selling is going by the wayside. When we talk about especially the younger generations that are very brand unloyal, we need to come up with alternative ways to really capture their attention and in order to make them see you as a valuable partner or decision for themselves in the future. The best and most effective social media programs aren't based on the promotions or the message distribution. Instead, they're revolving around removing the friction and uncertainty for potential customers. It's about marketing sideways, not marketing head-on. And I think you'll see that as an example in pretty much every case study that we'll be showing. So what are the other advantages for earned media? Well, it's really understanding whether or not you are a key player within your marketplace. So do you have an active voice? Do you have a fan base who creates content for you? In the sense that, a lot of times there's a lot of challenges about the type of an amount of content that needs to be created for those type of knowledge centers or earned media channels. And in many cases, like we see Dell, they're actually leveraging the content of the community to create content for itself. How are you battling negative PR? Are you the organization or the institution the one that's responsible for it, especially when something goes wrong across your social channels or something evil is posted about you? Or are you allowing and engaging and encouraging the community to come to bat for you? Are you supporting a cause? How might that fit into your business model? And of course, are you seen as a trendsetter? So where do we really see a lot of opportunity here is for those brands that feel like they may be out of touch or old school. Those that are struggling from a silo effect where there are many different departments within the organization that aren't seamlessly working with one another. And of course, those that are simply looking to increase their digital footprint or their digital reputation across the online space. Creating this type of content that is both encouraging and engaging and allowing that to be shared can open up new marketplace doors, can identify new opportunity audience, especially in the multicultural and multilingual worlds. So there's just a host of different opportunities that we see with using this type of approach. So owning and branding the Knowledge Center. We already talked about Dell. Here's a great example that I'd like to bring up about a recent campaign called Who Do You Want to Be? So as you can see, this was actually a collaboration between the California Community Colleges, the Department of Education, and the state of California. And basically what this is really looking to do is to create a stronger source of educational information for any type of individual that's considering going back to school, or for an alternative path other than a traditional four-year or private or a public educational college. So this was sponsored by the California Community Colleges. And as you can see, this is really a site that's dedicated to first helping individuals to identify where they are, who they are, and then really supplying them with the tools that they need to make the best decision about their future. So in this particular case, what I thought was so exciting, traditionally you don't see this. Many times when you're working for specific brands or organizations, they really have a very clear demographic that they're looking to attract, such as the high school student, or maybe it is the military veteran. But in this particular case, they really wanted to broaden that reach because as they understood, especially when it comes to community colleges, is there's just a huge opportunity for any type of individual to continue their education in some format. Other aspects that you'll see, not only from selecting and helping people to deductively kind of reason who they are and what they might need, there's also a huge promotion with the Win $5,000 to help you be who you want to be promotion right at the bottom. So again, appealing to a younger demographic, but also not turning off the older demographic was something that I feel was really important. So in this particular case, we went to the high school student. And as you can see, there's already video-based content, there's games, there's a quiz, which I thought was really interesting. No one ever told me I could make this much money. Who do you want to be? Pathfinder's quiz. And you can tell that it's a really, really fun and engaging environment to help individuals come to the conclusion of where they might want to focus. And if you were to fill this out, you would actually end up with potentially 3 different career choices. There's a wage report. You can skip right ahead to the different pathways. So in this particular case, I just clicked on fashion and interior design. And as you can tell, the mediums kind of match the different types of sites that many of these demographics are going for when they're finding or they're looking for entertaining content. So whether those are sports sites or news sites, the user experience is mimicking many of these different types of sites that you might see. Really fun and engaging user experience. You can obviously personalize it by finding a college that's near you with your zip code, so you can always skip straight ahead. You can find counselors, and you can share your story, which I thought was very important. So there you go. The other one was Stanford has an e-corner. So there's no surprise that this e-corner at Stanford happens to look, guess what, a lot like the TED site. They realize that obviously when they have the level of innovative thought leaders that they are either inviting as guests or that are already faculty, staff, or students, that there is an opportunity here to create tons and tons of incredible content. And that's exactly what they've done. They also wanted to create an environment that was very easy for entrepreneurs to access this type of information. So you have popular videos. You can browse by topic. Again, a great way to create a larger footprint amongst content that was already either being created or had the opportunity to be easily created. And you also notice that the production value is not very high. I think you'll understand that when creating video content, this isn't about creating highly polished content like what we saw 5 to 10 years ago. This is about creating very relevant content to the consumer. So usually when we're talking about creating these types of videos that are relevant to the marketplace, it's usually starting with a simple handheld and just capturing things that are already happening and not making it more of a bigger picture line item than what it has to be, because right now we're just kind of in the experimental stage. As you can see, this works really well with highly niche markets. In the case of eCorner, Stanford was really looking to attract the entrepreneur, which can be a very fickle group. We had also worked in the past with a certificate program at Caltech, and that was very interested in targeting the technology marketer. Again, these are very small groups that traditional methods of media just really don't work well with. So coming up with an alternative way to reach them, such as creating these knowledge centers, is a great thing to kind of walk through and determine whether or not might be a good fit. Also thinking about which content and which audience, you'll notice as we go through these sites, there's a different host of different types of content, such as white papers, images, videos, webinars. So really, how are these people developing that content? Well, you really got to think about the audience, and I can't stress enough how going to different sites that they usually go to for entertainment or education is going to be a really important way to determine what type of content you might want to create. We'll come back to content in a few. So evolving the relevance and access to content. Scottrade is currently a client of EMG's, and we had the opportunity to explore and play a large part in redeveloping their approach that they took for their About Us section on their site. Now, typically, the About Us section on most corporate sites tends to be very static and is more almost in the traditional brochure where they're simply posting press releases. They're really just developing out static content about the brand itself. But more or less, it's not one of the more highly visited areas of the site. Scottrade had a different vision for their About Us section, and that was to create a very engaging environment with vibrant and diverse content, both from video as well as the more traditional press releases, but almost creating an idea of a community around the corporate site itself within this particular subsection. So being able to look at the individuals that are behind the company, so looking at profiles, being able to comment and share content. You can see here the contributors on the right-hand side of the screen. You'll see down and below community involvement, so that cause approach directly in the About Us section. And these are under more traditional headings like photos and videos. So I would really encourage you guys to go to the site to see how they're using the About Us section to wholly differentiate themselves from any other marketplace competitor. So incentivizing. Obviously, when you create these types of environments for communities, it's very important that there's an incentive for individuals to become a part of them. We had the opportunity to work with State Farm and their 50 million pound challenge, in which there was a collaboration between State Farm and Dr. Ian Smith of the Celebrity Fit Club in order to create an opportunity and a community site that would attract the African American community to come together and help one another lose 50 million pound challenge. So this is just a great way of marketing sideways. What State Farm was sponsoring a site that could do no harm, that was actually doing fantastic for their community, and was also giving them the opportunity to introduce the State Farm brand to a new marketplace that they were really having a hard time getting traction in. So the opportunity, the incentive here, was to encourage one another and to give them the opportunity to form clubs, to form local groups in order to get fit. In the case of Zinch, who I really just adore within the educational space, they've created a really dynamic environment for all types of students that gives the student the opportunity through almost like a traditional social channel to find counselors, to explore schools, but also more importantly to find scholarships. So the differentiator here is that students can complete two of the tasks that are sometimes the most difficult, and that is one, getting exposure to the schools or the counselors of the schools that they are very interested in, and the second is to finance or fund their education. So two, really hits them over the head, and you can see that right in the user interface here, start your search or why Zinch. And it really plays it well. There is no advertisements. It's a very holistic approach, and you can also see the amount of money that they've funded. And then you can also see down here, Zinch matches any scholarship with the dollar for dollar. So this one-to-one sentiment, we also recently talked about Tom's Shoes and their business model of giving a pair of shoes for every pair of shoes sold. This one-to-one model is something that you're going to see really prevalent in many of the different types of promotional cases that within the Knowledge Center site space. User-generated content. We talked about this earlier, but actually using the users themselves to create a content pool that you can play with in promoting. And so this is just an example of two different sites. One was Tufts Admissions had created an alternative opportunity for students to submit videos along with their traditional application. And of course, you can see here with one of the more popular videos that they garnered over 20,000 views for Tufts. So I don't know whether or not Tufts had intended for this to be the outcome. By including that type of approach into their application mix, they're actually creating a wealth of really engaging content that is already branded for them, regardless of the student actually will accept it or not. I Love You, Beth Cooper was a small film that we had worked with 20th Century Fox to create a YouTube contest in which users would upload videos of themselves for a promotion that to potentially end up on television with their confession. So just two very different ways of really leveraging the community to create that type of content for the brand. And of course, the exponential growth within the digital footprint by getting these communities on board is invaluable. Apps and out-of-box technologies have also made it very easy for us to experiment. Obviously, we're using GoToMeeting today as a webinar. Great opportunity to create, things like virtual open houses for education, virtual open houses for patients in healthcare, whether it's recruitment of individuals for a brand. There's just all types of really easy ways for us to connect. Kick Apps is another great resource that we've used in the past that is used by a number of both entertainment brands as well as more traditional brands of creating social tools directly into the sites themselves. Because we all know that you can create all the content in the world, but unless you create an access point and unless you create the tools that allow for easy engagement, sharing, search across both the mobile as well as the more traditional desktop space, we're losing out on opportunities. Powering up the community using a cause approach. So what I've used is two examples. One of them we were very much involved with, which was the UCI capital campaign, Shaping the Future. And the approach we took to building their new web presence was very different than what you traditionally see with larger capital campaigns. And that was that we wanted to encourage individuals to feel that they were a part of giving back to the university in a non-traditional way. And the way that we did that was, as you can see in the top navigation, by identifying individuals not necessarily by what building or what school or college they might be interested in giving back to, but more around what cause they want to support. So is it health? Is it sustainable energy? Is it the environment? Are you wanting to support tomorrow's leaders? Or is it globalization and global impact that you're looking to support? So simply by changing the conversation and funneling individuals into different pathways than they were traditionally considered really led to a very successful campaign. Also, as you go through the site, many other things, if you saw on the 50 million pound challenge, there was a ticker tape at the bottom. These types of communities really like to see the impact that they are demonstrating. So things like bar graphs that change, ticker tapes. When you talk about challenging the community to become involved, these are great visualizations that you can include directly into the sites themselves. And that can be used for a host of different ideas. Making it very personal, we see a lot of testimonials. You'll see that as a common thread from many of the sites that we're showing where we make it personalized. You'll see contributors and you'll see different types of video content. So making sure that they have access, because again, we're trying to attract, in this particular case, a diverse of demographics. Making sure that there are different types of content that they can engage in right from the homepage is going to be very important. Johnson & Johnson, again, a traditional brand that usually has in the past been very direct in its marketing mix has began to understand over the last 5 years that selling sideways is probably a more effective approach to getting its brand front and center and top of mind amongst the professionals and the leadership or the decision makers that are responsible for buying their products in bulk. And in this particular case, they started a site called discovernursing.com. If you're not familiar with the nursing world, there is an extreme shortage of nurses currently that we're having in the United States. And so Johnson & Johnson saw that as an opportunity to build a stronger awareness around the profession of nursing by creating discovernursing.com. And again, similar to what we saw with the community colleges site earlier, they have really turned the site into a wealth of resources for anybody that's considering nursing, men in nursing, minorities in nursing. We talked about those niche sites earlier, nurses with disabilities. So really leveraging the fact that they want to overcome many of the stereotypes that are within nursing right from the site itself. The basics of nursing, as you can see, I would really encourage you to spend some time exploring, but how this approach might be used for something in your particular industry. So let's begin on defining a content strategy. We talked a little bit earlier on just what type of content we might want to create, but let's take that a step further and really start to determine what a playbook might look like. Obviously, we know the conversation is happening, so simply doing a gut check on the current brand position within the social space is going to be a first start. You know, what is your reputation? Is this a place you want to play in? Is it a relevant channel for you to start to build? Or is it something that you should play very softly in, and the fact that you're just more or less engaging, but you're not actually building these channels? A great way to start is an analysis of social data over the last 90 days. This is usually where we start if we're going to be doing market research for a client that's looking to build this type of site or type of content, to just simply determine how individuals are currently engaging with the brand online. What is the positive or negative sentiment of that? And also, where are they currently looking for the data or looking for the information that you may be able to provide, because that's where we want to take away the foot space from. So again, what level of visibility do you have within the space, and is there opportunity for building this dynamic platform as into your business model? The other thing that we always talk about is marketers are now having to think like publishers. If you noticed all of the different type of content that was being created around the site, you should have noticed that it was also very relevant, very timely, and very engaging with the type of audience that it was looking to attract. The New York Times has an educational space, so this is just a great example of a publisher actually developing, publishing content. But what you can take away if you go to the site, let me see if there's a simple vanity URL here. Oh yes, it's called, if you can see at the top, thechoice.blogs.newyorktimes.com. But what you can see here is daily updates that are very relevant to a number of influencers, from the students themselves to the parents. In this particular case, you see the most up-to-date, why so many applications for so few elite spots. So in the case of education, why couldn't you be supplying this type of information and sharing that? Also notice that a good friend of mine, Bruce Puck, is one of the contributors. Very interesting how they happen to call Bruce on that. The other thing is what type of content you want to create from an engaging standpoint. Puppet chemistry, making your own puppet drama, and coming up with really fun and engaging ways to personalize your content is also a very interesting approach that many are taking. So revealing timely industry insights, making sure that it's not simply about pushing your agenda, but making sure that you're covering a broad range of topics. Recognizing staff, influencers, and partners is also a great way, whether it's from a testimonial standpoint, whether it's from making them contributors themselves, but especially those that have large followings are somewhere that you might want to start. And encouraging content commentary as well as content ranking or rating is a great way for the content to become more viral. Also, and here's a really prevalent idea that many brands are taking. In this particular case, we're looking at Starbucks as well as Toyota on their Facebook page, but implementing the crowd, using crowdsourcing for ideation and promotion of the content itself. So how do you tap the crowd? In this particular case, Starbucks is saying, share, vote, discuss, and see. You know better than anyone else what you want from Starbucks, so tell us. So they're, again, similar to Dell, they're engaging and tasking the community itself with coming up with ideas. And this is a great way also when you have something like that was so contentious as the new branding that came out where many people either loved it or hated it. This is giving them an environment for them to explore those ideas about what it is. Also, what are we doing to make your Starbucks experience better? It's a great way for publicity. So this is an area that people are coming to give their ideas, but also you're using it to sell, again, sideways, on different content that you have already gleaned is contentious or interesting or hot topics. In the case of Toyota, they created a campaign. Well, you can see it's actually shifted from when I posted the thing, but to Hope for Japan. So sharing your message of hope and join us in supporting the American Red Cross relief efforts. So this is a great example of not only something that, of course, is very relevant to Toyota, but that they're leveraging their community. They have over 363,000 likes on this particular case of how people can get involved directly. So making this very relevant to what's happening in the world and how you can shift. As you can see here on the previous site, it was about the 100 cars for good. They've turned on a dime from really talking about the environment and eco-cause cars to something as relevant as Japan. So spreading the word and, of course, targeting those key voices in the industry are going to be very important. How is this content also being created? Not necessarily just by the brand itself, but by using potentially third partners. So this is just a sample ecosystem that we created for a client to kind of help them understand on how they may be able to use this type of approach directly into the marketing mix. And really what this is just explaining is that things like branded content can come from a number of sources, whether it be the community, and we talk about a user-generated content, or whether from third-party partners and tertiary clients, partner content like the New York Times. And then making sure that you have two opportunities, one within your main site URL, as well as across your social channels that you can syndicate this content from. And then finally, in the future, we'll be looking, of course, at tablets and mobile optimized sites or websites to deliver this type of content to, whether it be video, audio, or image. And then we just talked about similar ways of personalizing the site. In this particular case, this gleans right from, who do you want to be, and using the idea of people wanting to personalize their experience and creating and giving them control over the type of content they want to create. And we saw this over and over again from TED and Dell, the ability to search and for individuals to self-identify so that they can ultimately have access to the content that is going to be most relevant to them. So what opportunities as we kind of start to go towards takeaways? Community sideways is a great way to strengthen the relationship with the consumer. Paid media is highly competitive, so when we're looking at search display, we're also starting to see verticals that are starting to shy away from paid media and really focusing and refocusing their efforts on shared and earned media to develop a stronger channel, a more lucrative channel than what they've seen in the past. Potential tactics that you should take away are maximizing the momentum of brand awareness around the press and news releases, as we saw in Scottrade, actively counteracting negative sentiment where appropriate within your social channels by using your community to overcome that, and intercepting the consumer at vulnerable decision points much earlier in the phase of the process, I think, are some of the major takeaways. So ultimately, how do we also measure success? And because this webinar is going to be available afterwards, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I want you to be able to kind of go through, but you're really using social media intelligence and monitoring of the type of content that is being accessed, what is being shared, how people are engaging with it is the best way to determining whether or not what you're putting out there is working. Additionally, other ways that we measure are things like tracking impressions, video views, how long they spent on the video, whether or not there is revenue or indirect revenue through the social channels themselves. So setting up key performance indicators that can be easily measured using analytics is going to be a very important step. Engaging and disengage radio with respect to social priors, tracking drop-off or lack of engagement in the fans and followers that you've fostered. actions taken. So if you're creating promotions or events, how many individuals may be showing up at those events? How many are sharing content or posting images from those events? In the digital space, of course, how many people might be creating commentary or sharing? And then finally, the volume of conversation. This really is relevant to when we're talking about just increasing your digital footprint. Did you create something that actually got people talking? What was the volume of the conversation? Was it positive? And is it potentially happening in new marketplaces that you normally didn't have a stake in? And then finally, as a key takeaway, if we're developing workshops, we always like to begin with the whole. We don't want to build something and let them come. We want as many people involved in the ideation of these knowledge centers and the ideation of the content and the creation of the content as possible. So where do we start? Well, if you're thinking about considering developing a workshop on site, the first thing that we always want to talk about, especially with the senior leadership, is what is the fiscal or business expectations behind taking this approach? Where are there opportunities for new revenue? What are feasible goals within the 3 to 6 month process? How far should we experiment before actually really investing in it? And what content are we going to potentially make free to our community? And what might be premium content that we actually may be able to charge and actually create a revenue channel for itself? Infrastructure and process are also equally important. Who is going to own the process of creating this content? How will it be managed, stored, and searched for? Who is your primary audience? And what type of audience might you want to start experimenting with creating this content for? In the particular case of the youth, is it their parents? Are they English as a second language households? Could you explore with taking a different approach to an international audience? What are they used to seeing, searching for? What type of mediums are they digesting now and sharing? These are all going to be very important when asking questions about the type of format and user experience you're going to be creating for these environments. And then finally, how will you reward or incentivize those that are actually getting behind and fanning the flames of the content and getting it out there? How are you promoted initially? How will you build word around it? The technology, of course, is absolutely critical, making sure there's a sustainable platform that's easy to use, that you can create this content, and that has all of the unique tools that are going to be important for sharing and getting this content out there. And then finally, sustainability and growth projection. How will roles transition in your organization? Many times, EMG is simply accessed, and I've been asked to help sit in on governance strategies and determining who and how different roles that are more traditional in the organization are going to have to evolve and adapt to helm this type of new media mix. So that's pretty much it. So with Q&A, if you guys have questions, feel free to post. Otherwise, I'm just going to leave this on the screen, which is my top 10. As you guys kind of start to come up with any specific questions you have. Of course, you can always email myself or Zach, and we'll throw up that contact information here in a second with any specific questions that you might have. But the biggest thing that I think you can take away is really gaining momentum through small, measurable experiments, really trying to understand what type of content it is, and making sure that you also kind of put the ego aside, because much of this content is not for you. And so I skipped down to 10, silencing the devil's advocate. In the ideation stage or phase of these projects, when we're really just looking at what might be done, it's really important to get those individuals on your team that aren't necessarily naysayers, but are very open-minded to exploring different ideas that you might take with developing out these types of approaches. Also, leveraging your resources. There might be an intern or a junior individual that really has a strong vision for how you might want to create content, or whether there's might be somebody that has video experience on your staff that wants to go ahead and explore. Giving them that ability to control and create is going to be really important. Number 4, looking across alternative industries. As you can see here, what I really tried to give you was a diversity of different verticals and different industries that are using these types of approaches. So sometimes you kind of got to get out of your own backyard to think about and being innovative and trying something different. So with that, I don't see any questions, so we're going to probably wrap it up. Again, feel free, if there's any other questions that you'd like, you can reach me at my email, dnavarro@earthboundmedia.com. Or you can also find the webinar available today or tomorrow at earthboundmedia.com Knowledge Center. You can find that directly on our site, our YouTube page, SlideShare, as well as Vimeo. And of course, you can always stay connected with EMG. Thanks again for everybody, and hopefully we'll see you guys on our next webinar.